Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Georgiman and I'm your friendly neighborhood anime and manga fan. I love all things anime and all things manga, and I'm here today to talk about Code Geass, Roze of the Recapture, episode 7. So, what do you think about this week's episode? To be completely honest with you guys, I love this week's episode. And I would go as far as to say that I think this is the best episode of the series up to this point because it really gave us so many answers and so much depth into Ash's character as a whole, as well as establishing the setting more of the show and just, clarifying some of the things that have been brought up to this point in the story, and just pretty much, nailed it with everything. I thought that this week's episode just did a good job at characterizing Ash's entire character up to this point, as well as he gave us more depth into himself and the world of Code Geass after the events of Zero Requiem. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really good, solid episode, to say the least. Now, before I go any further with this week's episode, I just want to give you guys a quick reminder to make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you guys can be up to date with all my anime and manga, as well as all my Code Geass content that I'll be providing in this channel. It really helps out a lot, and I would really, really appreciate if you guys would subscribe to my YouTube channel. So if you guys could, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into this week's episode. So this week's episode starts off right where we left off last time, which is pretty much the night talking Sakura in the bathtub or the shower or whatever. And it turns out in this week's episode that the whole thing was misleading. It was a clickbait thing, because we found out that he actually was looking after her, and he's saying oh, I'm just making sure that you weren't the real Sakuya. And then he explains that the reason he's so invested in Sakuya and all that is because he was the knight of Lady Sherry, the Charles B. Britannia's daughter, the princess that married Yugo, which is Sakuya's dad. And we see that pretty much he feels I gotta protect you because that was my job. You're the daughter of the princess that I was protecting, so I gotta do that. And what happens after that is that we pretty much see Sakuya go to this orphanage thing, and she goes and talks to this nun, and this nun is obviously, she was working with the orphanage where Ash and the rest of the people were working, not working, but living there, like Nara, one of the knights. And she just goes, hey, tell me what happened, tell me the truth, you shall tell me everything that you know about Ash. And what we find out is pretty much the entirety of the episode revolves around Ash's whole backstory. And it was a very interesting backstory that I kind of figured some elements were going to happen, but I was still surprised nonetheless of all the things that went down, because we find out that Ash, he actually had a brother, which is something that I think most people, all of us, kind of assumed that Sakuya was just pretending to be Ash's brother. But to take it one step farther, this brother's name is Nico, and we see that pretty much they got adopted by Norland, as we were previously explained in the last week's episode. And we pretty much see that Norland from the get-go was a terrible person. He's making Charles Z. Britannia look like parent of the year in comparison. And we see that this guy was just using Ash for his own gain. He's like, hey, if you're weak, you're gonna die. And he pretty much he created this warrior in Ash, where he became a spy and an agent of his, and he's just killing people. And eventually he's like, if you're weak, I'm gonna dispose of you. And there comes to a time where as you see Ash's progression, he was like a kid, and then he got turned into a killing machine. And an interesting thing to note is that we knew that Norland was a previous Knight of the Round, and we see a little bit of a cameo with Bismarck, so that was cool, seeing the Knight of One from the original series, so that was really neat to see. But then we see eventually, like I said, it gets to the point where Ash is knighted. He becomes one of the a Knight of the Round in Neo Britannia, whatever. And we see that pretty much he goes on a mission, and this mission was to execute all these people. But you find out that one of the people living in that place is one of the people from his orphanage that he used to live as a kid. And he gets exposed by her, or she exposes him, she's like, hey, hey, is that you, Ash? And he can't compromise, and he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't want to meet you this way. So he's about to kill her, but then you see in the background Nico shoots her, my bad. And she's dead, and then eventually he detonates a bomb, and there's an explosion. And then we cut back to Norland's headquarters, and you see that he's good job, but he's you guys botched the job, you did a terrible job. It's and then you see Nicole being no, it was my fault, I'm so sorry, it's because of me, I was holding him back. And Norland was yeah, you're right, you were weak. And he just proceeds to stab him and kills him right in front of everybody. So I was yo, this guy is terrible. This guy absolutely sucks. Like, he's the worst the worst adopted father I could ever imagine in the show. But yeah, and that obviously triggers Ash, and Ash is like, I'm gonna like kill you, bro. And we see that Ash like snaps and he's about to like take out Norlin, it looks like, but then you see Norlin second in command, you know, the guy that's like doing the Code Geass, the Geass experiments in the last episode. We see that he interferes and takes down Ash, and like, my man has moves, you know. I just thought he was like a scientist guy. No, that guy, he has quick reflexes, takes down Ash, and he's like, okay, you're gonna be arrested, and he pretty much locks up Ash. And an interesting thing to note is that when Ash gets looked up, who does he bump into in the prison cell where he's being captured and kept in? He gets introduced to Yugo, Yugo Tsumeragi, which is pretty much Sakuya's dad, the minister, you know, of that Hokkaido, whatever. And we see that pretty much they hit it off the get-go. You know, he seems like a really nice guy, really great dad, and he just, you know, talking to Ash, like lifting up his spirits, like, hey, he's not eating, he hasn't eaten in 10 days, change his food. And like, he's looking out for him, and he's like, they're having like a nice little bonding moment. He's like, hey, who is important to you? He's like, well, I got a daughter, she's the most important person to me. And he's like, who's the most important person to you? And he's like, oh, my brother. And we see that, you know, they share like a lot of moments together, and eventually we find out that he's going to be executed. You know, he's just waiting for the date. Eventually the date comes, and he's like, okay, you're going to be executed tomorrow. One of the prison guards like, hey, we got to get you out of here because you saved my daughter and my wife, so I got to repay the debt. And he's pretty much breaking out the two of them. And as they're breaking out, you know, Yugo, he's like, hey, Ash, this is my daughter. If I don't make it, protect her. Promise you'll protect her. Which is a nice ironic twist because of how things had turned out. And we see that as they're leaving, he eventually, you know, things don't go their way, and you know, they get separated because they get compromised, they get caught, and start getting shot at. And we see that eventually Yugo, he opens his door and he's like telling Ash, like, get out of here, bro, like you're gonna die, you gotta make it out of here, keep your promise, protect my daughter if you find her. And he gets Ash out of the way. And you know, eventually, as soon as Ash gets out of the prison, he locks the door, and you know, he proceeds to be executed. Now it's like he blames it, and I get it now. He's like, I killed Yugo Tsumeragi because I could have protected him. So it makes a little, I get it, it's kind of like a retcon in the sense where you're thinking like, oh, it was kind of set up that he killed him, but now it's like, no, he thinks that he kills him because, you know, in a metaphorical sense. But how the episode starts, how it ends pretty much is we cut back to Sakuya, and she feels terrible about the whole situation, obviously, because like, yeah, her, you know, she just finds out all these terrible things that happened to Ash. And not just that, you know, when that happened with Yugo, he goes back to the nun, and that's when the nun finds out all about, you know, everything that's gone down, because I guess he just breaks down and just tells her everything. He, you know, the cat's out of the bag, and he just says like, I'm in pain, and he's like, I'm in sorrow, and he just starts talking to her. And eventually we cut her back, like I said, with Sakuya, and she's wandering around, and she's like, oh my god, like, you know, I feel terrible, I've been using him. And we see that pretty much how the whole Geass incident happened, where she used her Geass on him, which is, you know, like, he is being pursued, and she was being pursued, and then eventually when Ash, you know, catches up to her, she uses her Geass. And now we know the specific words that she used. She said, you shall protect me as you protect the most important person to you, so you shall protect me the same way. And now we know it's obviously Ash's brother. Makes sense now why, you know, Sakuya's putting on this disguise, whatever. And pretty much how the episode ends after that is that we see that, you know, Sakuya gets bombarded by, you know, more Norlin's like second in command, and he's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna take you out. And we see that they have this like helmets that prevent them from being affected by her Geass, because, you know, it's a voice thing, so it only works in like physical contact, or not physical contact obviously because it's voice, but if you have like a helmet or any kind of like noise nullifier, it won't work. So pretty much she gets detained, and that's how the episode ends. And overall, I thought this week's episode was really, really good. It was I think, fantastic episode, because it really showcased Ash's character as a whole, and his tragedy and his backstory. It was just great. So I loved it. Now, with all that being said, what did you guys think about this week's episode? Did you guys love it? Did you guys hate it? Did you thought it was alright? Whatever you guys thought, leave it in the comment section down below. Also, thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Code Geass, as well as more anime and manga content in the near future. But yeah, with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.